Imagine walking into a cafe to buy a coffee. You look at the menu, but the price listed there is a fantasy. Everyone in the room, from the barista to the customers, knows the real price is different. A secret number whispered in a foreign currency. This isn't a scene from a dystopian movie. This is daily life in Argentina, a country that has been living a lie for so long that delusion has become a national habit. How can an entire society function when its own money has no value? And what happens when a nation, pushed to the absolute brink, decides to elect a madman with a chainsaw to burn the whole system down? The sickness that has plagued Argentina for 100 years began with a seductive promise. In the 1940s, a charismatic leader named Juan Perón rose to power, and he offered the people a dream: dignity, prosperity, and a powerful state that would take care of them. For a while, the dream felt real. He raised wages, nationalized key industries, and built a welfare state that became the envy of Latin America. But this prosperity was built on a foundation of sand. Perón was spending money the country simply didn't have, turning the printing press into a tool for political power. He taught Argentina a dangerous lesson, that the government could create wealth out of thin air. It was the nation's first hit of a powerful drug, and it sparked an addiction that would span generations. After Perón, the cycle became terrifyingly predictable. Governments would come to power, promise stability, and spend wildly to keep the people happy. When the money ran out, they would print more, causing inflation to spiral out of control. Then, a crisis would hit, the currency would collapse, and a new government would sweep in, promising to clean up the mess. By the late 1980s, this cycle reached its most grotesque stage. Hyperinflation. Prices were doubling every few weeks. People's life savings were evaporating before their eyes. Workers would get their paychecks and literally run to the grocery store, knowing their money would be worth less by dinner time. The country was in a state of complete and utter disintegration. But that was when Argentina tried its most audacious trick yet. In 1991, the government introduced a plan that seemed like a miracle. It was called the Convertibility Plan, and it did something unthinkable. It legally pegged the Argentine peso 1-to-1 with the US dollar. Overnight, the chaos vanished. Inflation disappeared. Foreign money poured in. For a decade, Argentines lived in a dream world. They could travel, buy imported cars, and feel like they were part of the first world. But the stability was a lie. The country wasn't earning dollars, it was borrowing them to maintain the illusion. It was like a family living a lavish lifestyle entirely on credit cards. And in 2001, the bill finally came due. The system imploded in the most spectacular economic collapse the world had ever seen. The government defaulted on over $100 billion of debt. Banks froze people's accounts, stealing their life savings. Riots engulfed the streets. The country went through 5 presidents in 2 weeks. The dream of stability had turned into a waking nightmare, exposing the lie for all to see. But what rose from the ashes of that collapse would define the nation's soul for the next 20 years. This is where the story gets personal. After the 2001 collapse, Argentines realized they could never again trust their government or their own currency. And so, an entire parallel society was born, an underground economy, running on a currency that wasn't their own, the US dollar. This gave rise to the blue dollar, the black market exchange rate that reflects the real value of the peso. While the government posts an official rate, everyone knows it's a fiction. The real price of everything, from a car to an apartment to a laptop, is determined by the blue dollar. To get these dollars, people go to places called cuevas, or caves, hidden exchange houses tucked away in the back of newsstands or inside unmarked office buildings. This isn't seen as a criminal act. It's a necessary act of survival. Grandmothers, students, and business owners all know their local cueva bar. They have learned to think in 2 currencies, to live with 2 identities. It's a nation of hustlers, forced to become their own personal finance experts just to keep their families afloat. And it was this deep, simmering rage, the exhaustion of living a double life, that created the perfect storm for a political explosion. Just when it seemed the cycle of crisis and decay would spin on forever, a figure no one saw coming crashed onto the scene. His name was Javier Milei. He wasn't a polished politician. He was a wild-haired, leather jacket-wearing economist who looked more like a washed-up rock star. On stage at his rallies, he didn't give speeches. He screamed. He railed against the political caste, and most famously, he wielded a roaring chainsaw, a promise to cut the state down to its studs. He called himself an anarcho-capitalist and openly talked about burning down the central bank. To the outside world, he looked like a lunatic. But to millions of Argentines, fed up with a century of lies, his madness sounded like the only sane option left. In 2023, in a political earthquake that shocked the world, they elected him president. The nation had officially handed the keys to the asylum over to one of the inmates. And what he planned to do next was more terrifying and radical than anyone could have imagined. Milei's plan wasn't about reform, it was about demolition. He unleashed a brutal form of economic shock therapy, with two core components, known by two terrifyingly simple names. The first was the motosierra, the chainsaw. He immediately began slashing the government with a brutality never seen before. He fired tens of thousands of state employees, eliminated entire ministries, and cut off funding for everything from public works to cultural centers. He sliced subsidies for fuel and transportation, causing prices to triple overnight for ordinary people. The message was clear. The government party was over. The second part of his plan was even more cruel and cunning. The liquadora, or the blender. While the chainsaw cut spending, the blender was designed to liquidate the savings and wages of the people. Milei engineered a massive devaluation of the peso, effectively erasing the value of any money held in the national currency. Pensions and salaries were shredded by an inflation rate that briefly became the highest in the world. It was a calculated, ruthless strategy. Destroy the old system by making everyone in it poorer. He was performing surgery without anesthesia, and the entire nation was his patient. And now Argentina is living through the brutal paradox of that surgery. On paper, Milei's shock therapy is starting to show signs of working. For the first time in years, inflation is beginning to fall. The government is posting a budget surplus. Wall Street investors and the IMF are applauding him, calling him a bold reformer. But on the streets of Buenos Aires, a different story is unfolding. The human cost of his experiment has been catastrophic. With subsidies gone and wages pulverized, the poverty rate has exploded, now covering nearly 60% of the population. Once thriving middle-class neighborhoods are now filled with people selling their belongings on the sidewalk. Soup kitchens are reporting that they are seeing new faces every day. People who had jobs and stable lives just a few months ago. The nation is simmering with rage. Massive protests and strikes have paralyzed the country as unions and citizens fight back against a plan they see as a declaration of war on the poor. This is the central, agonizing conflict at the heart of Argentina today. Is this the painful but necessary medicine to cure a century of disease? Or is the cure actually a poison that will kill the patient? The world is watching Argentina not as a tragedy, but as the world's most dangerous economic experiment. Javier Milei has aligned himself completely with the United States, shunning China and other leftist leaders in Latin America, making his project a geopolitical gamble as much as an economic one. Global powers are watching to see if his brand of radical free market libertarianism can actually work, or if it will plunge the country into a social explosion from which it may never recover. For the first time, Argentina is not just repeating its own history, it is charting a course into a terrifying and unknown future. The question is no longer about another default or another currency crisis. The question is whether a society can be deliberately pushed to the edge of collapse in order to save it. Is this the blueprint for how other debt-ridden nations might one day have to solve their problems? Or is it a horrifying cautionary tale? A final, desperate act in a century-long drama of self-destruction? Argentina is about to give us the answer, and the world may not be ready for what it learns.